Welcome, everybody, to the CFF List year-to-date review of the top performers in college fantasy football, along with our predictions for the best and worst performers for the upcoming week. I'm your host, Jay Mill, along with my partner, Willie B, as usual. How's everything going, Willie?
Ready to turn this thing around.
As far as your predictions and the best worst?
That's right.
Yeah, well, let's jump right into that then. Well, that sounded very fake radio. Let's jump right into that. Well, all I'll say is I had a nice redemption in terms of performance here versus my waiver watch results, which, as we mentioned and we won't harp on, was the second worst of all time last week for week 3 as far as waiver pickups. But my predictions for picking the best and worst performers for the week turned out, from what I can recall, and you got a pretty good memory about these things, to be potentially one of the best of all time. I don't remember either one of us scoring this high in the past, but you might have a different recollection.
Well, would you end up with
15 points.
15? Yeah, that's gonna be pretty close. I'd have to give you the nod on that.
Yeah,
I'll
so
I'll research that a little bit, but I'm gonna go ahead and say that. I mean, especially considering the lowly 4 I put up again. So
yeah, you had 4 in back-to-back weeks. For those tuning in, as a reminder, we look at the year-to-date leaders, and Willie B and myself each make a prediction on who from the year-to-date leaders list will have the best week and the worst week. We get 3 points for predicting it exactly right, 2 points for picking the second best or the second worst performer, and 1 point for picking the third worst or third best performer. The way I got these 15 points was by accurately predicting 6 out of 8 positions, which we'll get into the details of as we review each position. But that's the part that, again, made me feel good that, I'm not the worst CFF analyst out here and that I do have some redeeming qualities. So we'll see if I can do it again here this week. I can't say I did feel really good about last week's picks after we finished, so we'll see if I feel as good this week. But Willie is needing to pick it up a little bit. I think he's had 2 out of 6 where he's gotten points the past 2 weeks. So if I recall, again, this is off the top of the head, I think typically you might see us get anywhere between maybe 9 and 11 points. I'd consider that kind of adequate. What about you, Willie? It's like, what are we aiming for here as a minimum bar?
I'd probably say, yeah, that's probably accurate. Yeah,
Yeah,
anything under 5 or 6 is pretty poor. So
yeah. The way I'm looking at it is if we're making 8 predictions, and let's say we get second best on those 8 on average, you would have 2 times 4, so that's 8 points. So minimally, I think we should at least look to get 8 points a week. How
right,
about we set that as the new goal?
right, that works.
And it seems like that's typically kind of around the range we're in. But again, that's what.
I think once we settle into the season, you'll probably see a little bit more consistency. You won't see,
Yeah,
so many, and there were just so many good choices to choose from, and then
and
so you're
mismatches.
down.
There
Right,
were.
right,
We talked about it last week and continue to talk about it even in the waiver watches. Just predicting what a star player on a Power 4 team is going to do against an FCS school where maybe the quarterback's playing 3/4 or half the game, but sometimes if a receiver's got a minor injury, like in the case this week of Ian Strong from Rutgers, they didn't even play him against Norfolk State. So that's why you see him listed here among the last week's year-to-date leaders from week 3. He was sitting there at wide receiver 11, ended up not even playing because of an injury. Not sure how serious it is, but my guess is, it's Norfolk State. We don't have to suit up Ian Strong against Norfolk State. Let's save him for Iowa this week, which is who Rutgers has.
right. And then also, I mean, to piggyback on the injury situation, why not just give him an extra week rest, get some of the young kids in, keep them out of the portal. Hopefully, that's this age we
Right,
live in now. So
right.
there's going to be those situations where the young guys are going to be playing, and then your superstars or the ones and twos,
Yep.
when the meat and potatoes of the season, you know, come up on us, and then
Yeah,
they're
why
there.
not? You
Yeah,
can't blame them. But for us as CFF players, it does make it difficult. But, this is the absolute last week of that until the SEC hits that weird part of the schedule in like week 8 or 9 where they've decided, to make it interesting and schedule random FCS games towards the end of the season to get some players some rest. This really is the last week before everybody starts conference play next week when things kind of kick into another gear. And finally we start to see some conference games this week as well. So this should be, it's all fun, but things are going to get a little bit more serious here as we roll into it. But looking now, just again at kind of how the top 16 wide receivers from last week fared, we had Jordan Tyson was my pick for the best. He ended up being second best with 22 points. We had your pick, Romello Brunson, ended up with only 10.7. But again, that's exactly what we're talking about. They played Missouri State, and it was a little tight in the beginning. But again, you never know against some of these teams. Once they got that lead late, they don't need to throw the ball. They just run the ball a little bit more, and they didn't need your guy as much as you thought they might.
No, I mean, you're paying them the money. There's really no need to embarrass them. But I mean, some teams do that. But I get it.
Right.
You're gonna have those. You're gonna have those happen. So.
Right. I got some more points here. I got the second best as far as picking the worst performer with Chris Durr from Wyoming. Knew we would have a tough matchup there against Utah. And you actually got some of your points there with Kenny Odom. As good as his season had been in the first couple of weeks, he ended up with only 6.5 against Texas. Nice job there. And again, we had Ian Strong with the 0. What's interesting to me, Willie, though, I noticed a lot of the guys from the top 16 weren't even close to being at the top of the performers list overall. There were a lot of outsiders that made their way in, as usual for this point of the season. But I'm trying to see the top performer. You had Mario Craver with 33. But that's a pretty big drop going from Craver at 33 to Jordan Tyson with 22. Normally you see a few guys there hovering around 30, especially from the top performers list. But as we kind of move into this week's top performers, you see a lot of new names, and that's because a lot of the bigger games were from guys outside of the top 16 this week, notably Omar Cooper, who moved all the way from number 58 into the 4 spot, because he had 54.7 points, which I think you highlighted in our top performers of the week slide that we post on Mondays or Sundays, is the most points anybody scored all year, certainly at their wide receiver position, but I think overall.
Yeah, it was the first 50-point game.
Yeah, first 50-point game we've seen by Omar Cooper. Chris Brazel from Tennessee. Also, he wasn't sitting very far outside of the top 16. He had 20. He was 22nd coming into this week, but he had 41 points. And then a guy who, again, had a huge game that's not even here in the top 16. The second best performer was E.J. Mason from Charlotte with 44.8. But that was kind of my point, is you had the top 4 receivers overall this week. Ted Hurst actually finished 4th with 39.2. None of them were even in the top 16. So, Craver, or even Jeremiah Smith was the 5th. And then you get to Craver, who, again, was the best out of the top 16, but was the 6th best overall. So you didn't even have anybody else in the top 20 performers of the week.
Yeah, I mean, we expected Jeremiah Smith to be on this list. It's just, taking a minute. The same thing with Brian Wesco. Get better quarterback play. You end up, shooting up the charts on lists like this. So,
right.
I expected an Indiana receiver to be there. I just didn't think it was going to be Omar Cooper.
Yeah, and now that's a good transition into the other thing we like to do when we're looking at the current leaders list, is kind of just have our rounds here at who we think will maintain their spot in the top 16 versus those we think are kind of one-hit wonders. And I think Omar Cooper is probably the definition of like a one-hit wonder, who just kind of had this huge game out of nowhere versus Indiana State, where we had talked about Surratt and how we thought he would do because he's on our Kings Classic team, and maybe he's not going to play as much because it's Indiana State. And, how long will he be in the game? We ended up playing him, but that really came back to bite us because, he's one of those top receivers that, only ended up with 3 catches this week, while his teammate Omar Cooper ends up with 10 catches for 207 yards and 4 touchdowns in a 73-0 blowout versus Indiana State.
Yeah, it's like I said, I mean, you don't want your top tier kids. I mean, this 73 to nothing. You know what that means.
Yeah,
You don't want you don't want him in a game like that when it's probably 28 to nothing. In the middle of the first quarter. But like you're saying, I mean, for Omar to basically double every stat other than the touchdowns,
right. Yeah, I'm looking.
you know,
Yeah, he had
I
five.
do not expect him to stay where he is.
Right, he doubled like in one game. He had twice as many targets as he'd had in the first two. He had 5 targets in the first 2 weeks. Had 10 in this one.
Hmm.
More than doubled the points he had for the season, the yards, you name it. So again, I saw people in different leagues I'm in go out and grab him, and I just kind of shook my head.
Now, don't get me wrong though. I mean, the kid is explosive. I mean, even against Kennesaw, he had one catch for 40 yards, but
Right,
he also had, I guess it could have been an end around. I'm not exactly sure, but he had one rushing attempt for 75 yards and a touchdown. So,
right.
I mean, he's got some electricity to him, but I just don't expect that to continue on
Yeah,
on a regular basis.
right. Looking back at last year, I mean, he was mildly productive. He had 28 catches, 594. So yeah, I agree with you. We're not saying he's going to totally disappear, but he's probably not a guy you want to go blow a ton of free agent dollars on.
Right.
If you're in one of those type leagues, he may not even be better than your third best receiver on your team right now, just
Yeah.
because he had this one big game.
I mean,
Um,
he's definitely one to watch, though. I mean, because even looking at Old Dominion, he had 2 for 52. I mean, so
right.
he had a 46-yard long. I mean, like I said, he's explosive. It's just a matter of can he earn the opposite of Surratt, or is he still going to be on the sideline until like in the points are out of control and then they put him in.
So yeah, the others to enter that were, I guess we mentioned the others that kind of made his way onto the list that we did expect at some point. Jeremiah Smith made the second biggest jump besides Cooper, coming all the way from the 40 spot up to number 7, and that was thanks to him having a 9 catch, 153-yard game and a touchdown. Second game in a row over 100 points. Sorry, over 100 yards. But again, he was sitting outside of the top 16 because week 1 he had 10 points against Texas. But then the last 2 weeks he's shown exactly what everybody predicted. Because he was kind of the overall number one consensus wide receiver in the preseason. He had 38 this week, and he had 29 last week. So
It's all about
definitely,
getting in that end zone.
it's got, and he's getting over 100 yards, which helps too.
But then now we have the bye weeks.
Yeah, now he's on a bye. If you've got him, you got to figure out a way to survive without him. So with that, let's transition into who we think from this list will have the strongest performance. Did we say the winner would go first from now on, so we wouldn't have to?
No, loser goes first, and
Okay.
you kind of chuckled about that. I think maybe you thought you wouldn't be there very long or what,
Uh,
but it's just the way we don't have to remember who went, first,
right.
last, and all that. So anyway,
Okay.
getting to the gist of it, not going to play around. We're
Hmm.
going Chris Brazel against UAB. I got to get some points up on the board fast, and they've
As
given up.
worth?
Say it again.
Did you mean to put the X? Or you mean to put the circle?
Yeah, I meant to put the circle. My bad.
All right, I saved you
Yeah,
there.
good. Thank you for doing
Yep.
that.
It sounded like you were going to go on the positive side with what you were about to say, so
I
that's why I
got you.
realized. Yep.
Yeah, they give up UAB. They give up 254 through the air. They've given up 7 receiving touchdowns. Chris is just. I mean, he's showing you he has big play capability. Let's see, he's got 5 touchdowns the last 2 games. Let's get 2 more.
Okay. No, I like it. I mean, he scored a big acrobatic touchdowns against Georgia. Seems to be the clear wide receiver one, which is hard to find in a Tennessee offense sometimes.
Right.
But he separated himself from the pack,
That's
pretty early here.
I think that's a little bit different. What I like about Heupel as opposed to what you'll see Lincoln do, and you have all these multiple wide receiver sets, but I think Josh knows where his bread's buttered, and
Mhm.
feeds his guys.
I like when you go first. Gives me a little time to look some more information up that maybe I didn't catch before we start the recording.
Hmm.
Pretty happy about this guy being there. as a selection for best options. He took a fall this week. It's Jordan Dwyer from from TCU. He's going to be playing against a very bad SMU defense when it comes to protecting against the pass. SMU has given up 320 yards a game in the air.
Oof.
This is one of those games with one of the higher over/under numbers up in the 60s. So Vegas is definitely predicting a lot of points. He's been getting he's had 8 and 9 targets in the 2 games he's played. He's already had a bye, but I look for him to get back to the numbers he put up against UNC when he had 28.6 in the opener. I think he can repeat that against a very, very bad SMU pass defense.
I think it could be a situation where their secondary just needs to tighten it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They've given up 5 touchdowns, but they also have 5 interceptions.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So maybe they're taking too many chances and
right,
leaving.
right. I mean, it could be a situation of that. So something to
Yep,
look into, but definitely with the yardage, I totally understand it. I'd do the same. And
yep,
the wire's been balling.
yep.
One here that I thought you would take. I thought you would do this instead, just to do the block. But I'm gonna go Ian Strong. You know,
Okay.
don't know, like you said, if he's fully there. But Iowa's defense doing Iowa things, giving up 120, and
Yep,
they've only given up 2 scores
yep.
through the air.
Now, looks like the report is he's expected to be back for Friday's game. That's a Friday night game.
Hmm.
I'm debating if I might try to get to that one. By the way, that should be a fun one for Rutgers going into that 3-0. Yeah, but I think it's a situation where they rest him. But I'm not upset with you picking him. I was leaning towards him as my worst only because they are playing an Iowa team who is typically very strong in all aspects of defense. Rutgers traditionally hasn't had a good passing game either. But we mentioned last week probably the best wide receiver core they may have ever had as a unit. But if he's hurt, maybe you lean on KJ Duff and DT Sheffield a little bit if you've got those guys.
Right.
There's clearly a reason they sat him last week, so it's just a matter of trying to find out how long it's going to linger and how much he can play. So that's a good choice. I stand behind you on that one. Not a bad one.
Excellent.
Now let's see who will get shut down. This is tough. Like we talk about this sometimes. There's a whole group that looks like they've got good matchups, and we might
Right.
be there this week, which makes me think that I may have to lean on a guy who might be stifled just because of their offense. I don't
Hmm.
see any true, super studly defenses here that are going to necessarily shut anybody down completely. So I think I'm going to go Cade Harris against Boise, just because the system that Cade Harris is in doesn't really lend itself to consistent receiving outputs. So against Bucknell, he had 36. He's kind of still riding off of that. That was week 0. So he's actually no, that was week 1. Sorry, it was a Thursday night game on week 1, I think, or a Friday night game. But he's already started to diminish a little bit. He had 17 and a half against Utah State this week. He had 3 targets and then 4 targets. So I think just on the lack of volume alone, Cade Harris is kind of due to disappear from the top 16 after the performance this week.
Gotcha. I like it. I thought you were going to go maybe Scudero because of that matchup. I wouldn't have gone Sparks. I mean,
No,
he's just been
no,
too good. But yeah, I do like that Cade Harris pick, even though I think I have him in a league. I always hate going against picking one of these guys to do the best, and then I'm playing them.
yeah.
So, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm looking at Scudero since you mentioned him, or just yeah. See, I think if they can, San Jose State's going to try to run it up against Idaho. They might leave the guys in there longer than you typically would if they've got a lead against Idaho because they're sitting there at 0-2 right now. They're trying to get some momentum before they start the Mountain West. So I think if they get a lead, they're not going to try to start pulling guys too early. So he might have a pretty decent game. I think maybe if I had a second choice be Hank Beatty going against Indiana, who's 6th against the pass, probably is my second choice. I kind of overlooked him my first go around on looking at the matchups here, but probably Beatty would have been my second choice if I had to pick another. But everybody
Yeah,
else
I
is
mean,
pretty good.
especially because Indiana, I mean, they give up 105, and
Right.
they haven't given up a passing touchdown. They had 4 interceptions.
Well, that's
So
crazy.
yeah, so
Wow.
they're doing pretty well right now, and then this is in
Yeah.
3 games.
Yeah. So on that note, yeah, that's an interesting stat here. It looks like there's six teams in college football that haven't given up a touchdown: Nebraska, Oklahoma, UCF, BYU, Indiana, and Arizona. None of them have given up a passing TD in 3 weeks of football.
And don't forget Oregon there.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, UCF
Yeah,
has only had two games, BYU 2 games, but still, it's
right.
pretty impressive.
That's
Oh,
still
Oregon's
impressive.
there's a seventh. Yeah, Oregon's a seventh
Right.
that hasn't given up a touchdown. Okay,
And then
wow,
and
that's
then
pretty amazing.
sneaky Arizona, they have 5 interceptions. I mean,
Okay,
they're
yeah,
doing some things.
that's saying something, and
Yeah.
even more, giving up 3.8 yards attempt is all.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, that
Okay.
is right. Which, by the way, on the opposite end, you've got UAB giving up 11.4 yards per attempt against them on the defensive side of the ball. So, and they've given up 7 touchdowns and no interceptions.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I say, I mean, Tennessee should do well.
Yes, yes, that's another reason to take your guy there. That's your best pick with Brazel. Very good pick there. Is what it's looking like. Okay. All right. Moving on to running backs. Looking at the top 16 here, you actually had a pretty consistent top nine when I was looking at this. Nine of the guys at the top of the list here, or I should say, 8 of the 9 guys had pretty good performances, and I guess we could even say 7 because Jonah Coleman had a bye, so of course his number didn't change. But 2 of the top 3 performers of the week were in the top 4. Robert Henry, he finished with 29.2 points. Emmett Johnson had another 22.5. Um, so Emmett Johnson moved into the top 16 last week from 31. You came in to the 4 spot and finishing with 22 and a half. He's going to stay right up there in the top 4. Jamari Taylor was really the only disappointment in the top 9. He had only 9.1 points. We talked about that game in the waiver watch draft, how after 2 big weeks, it looks like they spread the wealth a little bit with Whaley having a huge game. They had a fourth running back besides Xavier Brown and Whaley and Taylor that even got in and got over 10 carries. But it seems to be, again, a situation where, we're just giving a guy a break because we're playing William and Mary. I know you got a little frustrated by that because he was one of your waiver pickups too, Willie, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just frustrating sometimes.
Right. So thank God most of those types of matchups are over and done with here, as conference play resumes, as we mentioned. Now we get into the kind of the second half of the list, those guys that were 10th and worst, and Miles Davis, a 5.4 against Air Force, Devin Mockabee, a 4.5. These were both guys that we predicted going into this would have tough games. So we scored points there for our competition. Mockabee ended up being the worst performer with 4.5. That's who I thought would be the worst. Miles Davis was third worst with only 5.4. And then Jamari Taylor in his 9.1. Jamari Taylor was actually third worst. Looks like Miles Davis, maybe you got an extra point there, Willie. He was actually second worst. I have to double check the scoring there. When we can go back through and see if we need to make a correction. He's labeled 14th, but he
I'll
probably should
see.
be labeled
Hey,
15th.
hey, this is what I mean when I let you do this. You pencil whipping me, I think.
He's trying to cheat you of a point or two here and
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yep, yeah, but we'll see. We'll go back on that later. But then our top performers that we thought from the running backs here tripped us up a little bit. We thought Cameron Cook would have a nice one against Georgia Southern, who was horrible against the run. He only managed 13. And then Jevin Jackson from UAB, same thing, was going against a really bad Akron defense and didn't quite work out for us there in terms of their production.
I have a little bit to say. Last week was just bad on my part. So
Yeah, I'm trying to see what the score. Yeah, you would think that you know Cameron Cook ended up losing to Georgia Southern, so my guess, again, you can't watch every
Jacksonville,
game,
yeah.
so you don't necessarily have a feel for what was going on. But maybe they just couldn't lean on the run as much because they were playing from behind and trying to come back.
Which I mean is just disappointing because Georgia Southern, they were ranked. Well, we had them basically almost dead last,
Yeah,
basically,
but
and Cook
maybe
can't
it's
get going.
maybe it's telling us a little more about that Jacksonville State defense that we need to know. That maybe they're
Right.
going to be playing, from behind too much for Cameron Cook to maintain his status as a top 16 back. Something to keep an eye
Mm-hmm.
on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, um, otherwise, yeah. So you had everyone from 10 to 14 left this list. So Miles Davis, Cameron Cook, Maccabee, Jevin Jackson, and Rashad Dubinion all did not do enough to maintain their status in the top 16. Dubinion was close. He had 15 and a half. Not a horrible game, but it was just a little too much. Your top performer from the top 16 was Rayshawn Luke from Fresno, who I believe you grabbed in the waiver watch this week, Willie.
Yes, I did actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so looks like he's up to 42%. So people were listening. Uh, but here's what's crazy: Rayshawn Luke is up 37.6% points in rostership. So when we
Wow.
had our waiver watch, he was probably under 10. That tells me, and he's now at 42% roster. Yeah, that's amazing. So people are paying attention there, and including you. So, what does that do to the new top 16? Well, here we go. Let's take a look. It keeps the top three of the top four are all familiar names. They didn't move much. Coleman maintains the number one spot because of the bye. Robert Henry holds on to the number two spot. Emmett Johnson moved from 4 to 3, and Justice Haynes from Michigan, drops just slightly from 3 to 5. So your four of your top five are very steady. Dylan Smothers isn't far behind. He was number 6. Now he's number 7. Number 6, Kawan Lacey just barely dropped to number 8. So again, because you had so many guys at the top of the running back list maintain that high level, you don't see a lot of turnover. You did see Rayshawn Luke jump from 16 to 6 because of the game we just talked about. But I guess the biggest name here, one that people have seen coming along, and that's Ahmad Hardy, who's making a very nice transition from the group of 5 into the Power 4 ranks. He went from 48 all the way to number 4 after a 43-point performance against Louisiana Lafayette,
Mm-hmm.
which I know they don't like to go by Louisiana Lafayette. They just like Louisiana, but for clarity, they were playing the Louisiana team that's based in Lafayette.
Yeah,
And
they like the the state term. I mean, they don't want to be confused with LSU, which you would think is going to be the opposite, but it's not. But it's really weird. Anyway,
yeah,
Hardy. I mean, the kid's getting the totes.
yeah.
10 carries, 25 carries, and then he had 22 against Louisiana. Doubling that production, that 250, that's impressive.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to look at his counterpart. There was some you know, concern in the beginning of the season if he would even, be the starter, how much he was going to split carries. Jamal Roberts is their number 2 back. He's had a decent season, but just to compare carries, Hardy's getting into the 20s. Jamal Roberts just has 8, 13, and 8. So I think any concern about, sharing the load too much or not being really a quote true number one is out the window. He's definitely proven that he's just on a different level, whether he's playing in the G5 or the Power 4. He looked really great in that game.
And I just like the fact that they just feel like they could just maul people. I mean,
Yeah,
for them to have those two backs, 20, 22, and 13, to have that, what they did against Kansas the week before,
yep,
that's just impressive to me. And then, you get South Carolina, who may or may, I mean, we don't know if Sellers is playing.
right.
So without Sellers, yeah, I don't know. This could be bad.
Yeah, I'm looking trying to see how many carries Pribula's getting a game because he's been running the ball really well also. Or I thought he was actually. Okay, so only week one, Pribula had 65 yards in week one, but he's only had 6 and 5 yards the last 2 weeks. So I know there was some talk that Pribula might be running a little more. Doesn't look like he's having to because of how well Hardy's doing, and then how well his receivers are doing there also with Coleman, who we'll see I think later on. But
Well, I mean, do they include the sack yardage? I mean, he was
they
sacked.
do.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was
that
sacked
okay.
for. Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, they show you the sack yardage, so he actually still hasn't had that many rushing yards.
Yeah, let's see. What did he lose?
So he had four for 13, and then he had 2 for 18 last week.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So he's not getting sacked a ton. He's losing a little bit there. But even if you give him those yards back,
Right. That's still not
he
much.
hasn't come close in the last two games to the 65 yards he had in game one.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like he can run if he needs to, but I'm standing on what I said earlier. He just doesn't have to right now because of
No,
the
I mean,
volume he's doing.
when when your backs are doing what they're doing, just stay out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. The next biggest entry here is Kajan Owens from FIU. Uh, Huge leap from 78 to the 16 spot. But based on what I've seen, I think he's a guy that's going to stick around. We mentioned him in the waiver watch. I picked him up there going into this week. He was under 30%. He's only at 34% rostered now, but his carries have gone the right direction. He's gone from 11 to 15 to 19, and against equal competition because they played FAU this week. He blew the doors off of this thing. 19 carries, 173 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Uh, and he's one of those guys who's got some size to him, some strength to him, and clearly some athleticism to go along with that. He's one of those six foot one guys who's about 210, 215 pounds. So he's got the whole package there. And I did catch a little bit of that game, and he was looking really good. He seems to be a guy who's broken through what people thought might be a committee at FIU, and he's been used to sharing carries, but I think now he's got that backfield to himself.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, they could be doing what Missouri is doing. I thought Lions would, get a little bit of those carries, but
Mhm.
no, it has not trended that way.
Right. And you're talking about Devontae. So his counterpart there, yeah, in the backfield is going the opposite direction. He went from 8 carries down to 3 carries against FAU. So it looks like a guy who, as they get ready to get into the Conference USA schedule there, is going to have some pretty juicy matchups, as boy Nino Brown would like to say.
Yeah, and then the Lions, he's just pressing a little bit too much, and so Owens is free to, get as many carries as he wants at this point.
Yep. And how about this coincidence? The preseason number one receiver and the preseason running back number one both make their way into the top 16 year to date leader list in the same week as Bryson Washington bounces back in the last 2 weeks from a very slow week one start. So he jumped from 38 to the 15th spot, almost came from exactly the same spot Jeremiah Smith came from. He moved from into the top 16. Bryson Washington coming in from 38 up to number 15. And again, he only had 8 points in week one against Auburn, but he had exactly 27.6 points in each of the last two games.
Volume and carries.
Volume, carries, and 2 touchdowns in each of these games. But
Right.
this is exactly what we thought. He wasn't everybody's running back one, but he was within the top 2 or 3 for just about everybody, and he was our running back one because we just didn't see a lot of competition in that backfield. So yeah, expect more of this as they
Yeah.
get into the Big 12.
I think they learned something in that Auburn loss. He had 14 carries in that game. Then he comes
Yep.
back at SMU with 31, and
Hmm.
then Sanford, 21. So, like you said, go to what going to get you there, and that kid's gonna that's their offense. That's at least
Yeah. Yep.
that's where it should start.
But now the
So,
great thing about that, about him needing to be a focal point of the offense is that teams can't necessarily key on him either because they've got Sawyer, Robertson there,
right,
doing a heck of a job. So, you can't pick a guy to key on there. So that should keep things open for Bryson Washington to keep doing his thing. Seth McGowan, from Kentucky. Uh, Again, another guy making a nice transition from Group of Five to Power Four. He was at, I get him mixed up all the time. Was he at New Mexico or New Mexico State last year? He was New Mexico State. I didn't remember this. Wow, he was just Oklahoma is where he started in 2020 in COVID season.
yeah, they have a lot of backs floating around the country that
Yeah. Wow.
just couldn't stick. But
yeah, there's a gap on Fantrax. There's a gap in between, which tells me he must have gone then either down to the FCS or JUCO. Came back, was at New Mexico State last year. Uh, had a solid fantasy season. Was on our waiver watch, I think, towards the end quite a bit. 813 yards. Didn't get many touchdowns. He's already doubled his touchdown production. He's gone from 3 last year. He's already got 6 in 3 games this
mm-hmm.
year. So, and 3 of those were this week against Eastern Michigan.
Well, I mean, they all still count.
They all still count, and another guy still might not be too late to grab him in kind of normal size leagues, those leagues with just 12 teams.
And he's just one off the pace from Jonah Coleman, who leads the country with 7.
As far as touchdown scored,
Right.
okay, there you go. So he's going to bye this week, and then he'll come back and start, his SEC schedule, which will be a little bit tougher. So curious to see. I'm going to take a guess here that he's off and on. I don't think he maintains top 16 status, but he's a top 25 back this year.
Okay.
From what I've seen so far. Turbo Richard, we called him out last week as far as a guy we picked up in the waiver draft. He made his way from 20 to 11. Dylan Smothers is impressive when you look at his stats, by the way. He's one of those guys that's turning into a volume pig, getting 20 carries a game. So just, again, a good group of guys here, most of which you're not going to see leave this list. So those top 8 certainly prove themselves this week. But with that said, I've got to make the first pick here on who will have the best or the worst week based on the matchup. I am going to go with, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we go with Robert Henry there against Colorado State? He's done nothing to make us doubt his potential. He is the leader of our Kings Classic squad outside of the quarterback room. Extremely happy to have grabbed him. He's going against what seems to be a pretty bad Colorado State rushing defense, not only 108th in yardage allowed, but 111th according to Fantrax, and fantasy points given up to running backs. So I will happily take Robert Henry and expect him to do what he's done all year, which is,
Dominate.
constantly have games at 29 plus points.
Yeah, I was hoping that he would slide. Like I said, Colorado's they've given up 6 on the ground. They gave up 173 yards a game. So yeah, I can't fault you there when taking that. So, but with that, I'm going to take my worst, so you don't just hop in on it. I'm going to go with Emmett Johnson. I'm going to trust a little bit that Michigan can continue to right this ship, and Emmett Johnson is going to be the victim of that.
Gotcha. Okay. Not bad. I thought you would. I guess you didn't have to jump on your best since I'd already done that. So yeah,
Right.
I thought you might go with the guy just to the left there, and you still might.
Well, because the thing is about Nebraska, I mean Akron. No, he's going to have to prove himself. I think he's going to come back down to what he had against Cincinnati, which was 25 for 100 and not in the end zone.
Right. Okay. The next choice for worst is pretty tough. I mean, the toughest matchup on paper appears to be Bryson Washington going against Arizona State.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't buy that.
I don't want to rule against our number one.
No, and I don't. I'd have to dig deeper to see how Arizona State is the 27th best against the run. But yeah, I trust Baylor's offense even against what seems to be a pretty decent team there.
Yeah, Arizona State's given up 91 on the ground and 2 scores.
Okay, yeah, so they seem to be pretty tough
in 3 games.
So I'm going to go. Wow, just because it seems to be mixed up down there, and Stanford has done, fairly well against the run. Jamari Taylor going against Stanford, primarily because even though he had those 2 really good weeks to start, what happened last week, even though it was William and Mary, scares me a little bit. Whaley looked really good when he did get his opportunities. Xavier Brown was already there. They've thrown in a 4th guy into the mix. So I think you might start to see a little more distribution in terms of the carries and the number of players they're giving the ball to, on top of the fact that, Stanford's been pretty good against the run.
Gotcha. I like it. Yes, like I said, they played a little bit better. Still, not where they should be, as far as Stanford is
Right.
concerned.
Only three touchdowns allowed on the ground, too, by the way, by Stanford.
Well, I mean, well, let's look at the passing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Let me
probably
see.
because they don't need to run on you, but
Yeah, they've given up 7 in the air.
yeah. So why run when you can pass? I guess.
Right, right.
So for my best, I'm gonna go with one of the best backs right now. He's averaging. Let's see, that's not correct. Let's see, he's averaging two. There we go. He's averaging 144.
Hmm.
He's already had, like we said, he already has the 7 rushing touchdowns. Washington State has already given up 6, and they give up 144. So this is a perfect matchup for John Coleman. He should be right here at the top of this list when we talk next week.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Those two at the top, really, like we said, the top 4 out of the top 5 have been here all year. Or well, not all year. Emmett Johnson's been here the last 2 weeks, but yeah, this looks like a really solid top 5 in my opinion, with Coleman, Henry, Emmett Johnson, Hardy, and Haynes. We'll see if Johnson can last, though. You're saying he won't. I don't disagree with you as far as him maybe having a tougher road. So there it is. Those are our predictions for the week for the running backs. Let's move on to the QBs. Do a quick review of last week's top 12. I guess looking at the top picks, I thought John Mateer would have a good game. He had a solid game with 27.6, but a few other quarterbacks here did quite a bit better. We had Sorsby top this group with 40. Taylon Green.
That's my quarterback there, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah, you've always liked him. Taylon Green couldn't maintain 40, but still managed 33.7 points. And then Colton Joseph, it's kind of quietly just continued to move his way up the QB list. One of last year's big surprises, not a surprise to anybody this year, consensus top 10, is now up to number 3. And I can't remember if he moved into that 2 spot, if he had enough to past Mateer, but we'll find out here in a minute. So really a good group of performances. I think we called that out last week. We didn't think the QBs would have many bad games from the list we saw. And I'm looking, just about everybody had more than 18 points. I think there were only 3 or 4 QBs that played that had under 18, starting with Ethan Vasco, who only had 12.3. You had Parker Navarro, only had 8.1, but we knew that was coming. You predicted that, Willie. Got some points there because we knew against Ohio State he would struggle. And then, the other one we predicted as well. Evan Simon is the QB I thought would have the worst day. He only had 2 against Oklahoma. So
I didn't think it was that bad watching that, but yeah, wow.
yeah, he struggled. We knew he would. Those are both quarterbacks that Navarro for sure will be bouncing back and dominating in the MAC. Evan Simon, the jury's still out. We'll find out. He started off great, but against really bad teams. But then on the other end, he played Oklahoma and only got 2. So you're seeing him perform against extreme levels of competition here, extremely bad and extremely good. So again, the jury's still out. Where will Simon finish? Probably not the top 16, but he's probably a QB that's going to get you 20 points a game, which still isn't bad. So if you've got him, I think you should definitely hold on to him, see what he does here against the American competition. Because he is capable, I think, of competing well against that level, just maybe not at a 30-point per game level, closer to 20-point per game level.
Right. I trust a guy like Dampier to move up the list more than I would a Simon. But
Exactly. And how far out is Dampier now? Let's see.
he he's still outside the 16. So it looks like he's let's see, 18.
18th. So
18.
it's kind of just barely outside. All right. Just looking now. Let's move on to this week's list. Here's your top 16 QBs. No surprise, Taylor Green maintains his spot, still averaging over 40, which is amazing. Now he does have the SEC, more SEC coming up. He did have a game in the 30s last week in his SEC matchup, but I think you see him start to get closer to 30 on average. Be fun to see if he holds on the spot. Sorsby moves way up the list with that top game among the top 16 from last week. Moves him all the way from 10 to number 2. Another big jump is we had
The one we need to probably take a note of is going to be Haynes
yeah
King, since he missed the game week 2
yeah
for injury, which that's why he has the dash because he was not even ranked because you have to play 51% of our games to qualify.
Mm.
So he didn't. So that's
Right.
why he technically makes the biggest jump, even though he should always stay here, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So meaning he didn't qualify for last week's top 16 because
Right.
of the game he missed with an
And,
injury.
and he
Now,
and he and he wouldn't have qualified for the top 150 only because he didn't have enough games.
right. Right. Exactly. So yeah, he is. If he's healthy, he's a guy that's going to stay here.
Right.
He's been here for 2 years straight now,
Hmm.
proving himself. But you do have some guys that came from pretty far out. Our guy from the preseason that had a lot of haters, but was still in our top 16. Mr. Joey Aguiar at Tennessee in the game of the day against Georgia ended up losing. I think he won over a lot of CFF doubters in that loss. Moved from 52 to number 13. Fernando Mendoza moves from 51 all the way to 11. And then you had Ty Simpson from Alabama jump from 35 to 12. We thought Alabama was going to have a bigger passing season than they'd had in the past, just based on the fact that the head coach is now reunited with his longtime offensive coordinator, who was in the NFL last year, but kind of quickly came back to coach with his pal there, DeBoer at Alabama. Simpson's going to be the beneficiary there. He's just progressing very nicely, moving from basically 20 points in week one, 27 points in week two, and 34 points last week against Wisconsin. So it's 382 yards, last week for Simpson, 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So
Now,
I'll take it.
Joey, that he was my preseason QB 12. So happy to
Mm-hmm.
see him, be right around that range on this list, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, he continues to do that and improve himself in this SEC play that's coming
Yep.
up.
Yeah. And one, two, three, four, five, six guys make their way onto the list from outside the top because the two other names, Nick Minicucci from Delaware
Which,
jumped from 32 to 9. It looks like he was tied at second with Jake Retzlaff from Tulane, who jumped from second to sixth after the game last week, the big game that Retzlaff had last week. A little bit tougher though this week. Retzlaff is going to play Mississippi. Not necessarily tougher for Minicucci though. He's got FIU. So Willie, you're going first.
yeah,
Let's see what your thoughts are.
Retzlaff, he hung it up on Duke, and
Mm-hmm.
he did that on the ground. He had 17 for 111 and four rushing touchdowns. He didn't even throw
Yeah,
for a touchdown.
yeah. And by the
So,
way, yeah, I wasn't aware of his rushing capability. I guess like I should have been because that's now he's had 113, 64, and 111 yards on the ground in his 3 games.
mhm.
And he's only been sacked once in each of those games too. So
Oof.
looks like O line is holding up for him because he's passing the ball 20, on average looks about 25 times a game, and he's only getting sacked once a game. So it's either his O line or he's able to get out of the pocket and make some things happen, and it's probably a little bit of both.
Well, then interesting. Ole Miss has given up six rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he
Uh,
had 4 last week, so we'll see what happens there.
yeah. Um, this is one that I didn't. We had some other things come up today, and this is the one that I did not have my pre-notes on. So looking at these matchups, wow, this is a little tougher to do as far as worst.
Yeah, yeah, because the guys
Wow.
with the teams that have been good against the pass
Hmm.
are actually a couple of P4 schools playing Group of Five schools where the ranking might not matter as much. And I'm meaning like Haynes King is playing Temple, who's 38th against the pass. But what does that really mean? Taylor Green's going against Memphis, who's 39th against the pass. Does it matter as much? Are they still going to like overmatch them? And does the
Yeah.
ranking matter as much
Well,
when a P4 school is playing a G5 school?
I'm gonna go with our rankings and what we're doing. I'm gonna take Baron Morton. They're going against Utah. They give up 134. They've only
Mm-hmm.
given up one passing touchdown. They have four interceptions. I know he's been playing well,
Mm-hmm.
or he wouldn't be on the list. But with all of the other options here, I think he's probably the best one to go with. He's had, four touchdowns, three, and then four the last 3 weeks. Let's say they hold him to half of that, and that should be hopefully good enough.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, I know who I want as worst, but I'll try to grab the first best option. You know what? Let's just mark my worst. I think the next one's more obvious to me. Since you were talking, I got to look here at a few numbers, and I don't like Mendoza's matchup against Illinois. The more I look at that, they've only given up 2 touchdowns. They're only giving up looks like 114. No, what is it? They're giving
Um,
up 212 a game. Is that right? No. Where are we at here?
they're giving up a 193, 194.
Yeah. Um, the 56 in the country, though, only giving up 2 touchdowns. That's what really caught my eye there for
Mm-hmm.
Illinois. And like you mentioned, a lot of these quarterbacks have favorable matchups. The one that I might have leaned towards would have been maybe Pribula against South Carolina. But again, we talked about how that offense is rolling. So I don't even want to necessarily doubt what his potential is going to be. Maybe, again, because it's P4 going against a group of five. Maybe Mississippi's able to shut down Retzlaff and Tulane. I'd be shocked if he can, do what he did last week against a school like that. But those would be two other names that, you know, I might lean towards as far as being on the worst half of this group. But you should see some big performances here by everybody else.
Right. Let's see. Just look at. Okay, I just have to go with this guy. I mean, he's like I said, he's my he was I mentioned him. He's my QB 12. As
Mm-hmm.
much as I really love what Mateer is gonna do this week, I think Taylor
Mm-hmm.
Green will still be able to put up decent numbers against Memphis. But
Mm-hmm.
Joey Aguiar, UAB gives up 254. They've given up 7 passing touchdowns, not to mention what they're going to be giving up on the ground. We saw what Joey can do with his legs when he wants to. So let's go, Joey. He's going to continue to move up this list.
Okay. Yeah, that's who I would have picked if you weren't picking there. I should have taken him before I picked my worst. Now that I think about it, if I was that sold on
Oh,
Aguiar,
perfect
but
snipe. I like it.
yeah, I just wasn't thinking when I didn't have to pick a worst because you had already done it. And I think we've got to go on my end for the best. There's a couple of good options, but we got to change Robinson to Robertson. By the way, Sawyer Robertson. We got a little typo there, and that's who I'm going to take for my prediction here for the best. He's going against Arizona State. We mentioned in the running back slide, Arizona State's been doing pretty good against the run, but they're not doing nearly as good against the pass. They're 99th in yards allowed. They've given up, moderate amount of touchdowns. 5 seems to be the average. They've given up 5, but you know, Sawyer Robinson's been pretty incredible this year. That's why he's sitting here at your number 10 spot. I expect him to have another close to 30-point game, if not 30 plus, against Arizona State.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how many points Arizona State gives up. That's the one thing about Baylor. They're going to put up the points.
Right.
So, it's how much can Arizona State match that? And if not,
Oh, to get
it'll
it to, to keep it, you're saying to keep it close and keep
yes,
him having to throw? Yeah.
right, right.
Well, I mean, yeah, they've got some weapons. They've got Tyson and Levitt there, throwing the ball. So I don't think it'll be a shootout like you had with SMU and Baylor, but it's got the potential to be kind of high flying.
Yeah, I mean, but 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. There's not much to not like against that. I'm really interested to see what Minakuchi will do against FIU.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I
I was close to taking him there. Yeah,
one thing I saw about Delaware, they seem quick,
yeah.
and this is
Okay.
against I thought they would be the inferior opponent, and they are not. At least what I'm
Yeah.
seeing. They look really quick in a lot of positions.
Let's see what the line is on that Delaware game, real quick. I'm just curious who the favorite is in that game because they might be the favorite going in.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Taking a while to load, didn't take that long, but okay. Yeah. FIU's favored by 5.5, and the over under is 55.5. So Vegas is predicting a decent amount of points, but Delaware should be in the game according to this.
Right, and from what I've seen, I expect that.
Yep. Okay. Well, there we have the quarterbacks. Get through these tight ends. Looking at last week, I think I had texted this to you, and
Boy,
you didn't quite understand what I was meaning. But I think, let me count it up again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Half of this list, we only do a top 12 for tight ends versus 16 for the other group. Half of the top 6 tight ends scored 3.4 or less points. It's what I was trying to tell you. Pitiful.
No, I think I saw that it was just more so. I'm coming to expect this. You can't
Yeah.
count on them. I mean, there's going to be
No.
one or two guys that you can probably count on, and then
Yep.
outside of that, it's just going to be a crapshoot.
Yeah. And guys are starting to prove themselves, though. It's a competition, and we're picking who's going to do the best. This is where I got some of those other points. Jeremiah Franklin managed 10.1 for the second best out of the group. Eli Raridan is coming on strong there from Notre Dame, proven to be a guy that I think will rise on this list. He had the best performance out of the top 12 with 12.5. But then you go down and look at your third best performer, it goes down to 8. Dan Villari from Syracuse managed 8, and that was enough to make him the third best tight end from the top 12.
Right. Against Colgate, which, he probably didn't even play the whole game.
Yeah, yeah. And you had the goose eggs by Clark, Temple versus Oklahoma. All right, we saw what his quarterback did, so that's really not a surprise. I got points for predicting him to have the worst, and he did. Then you had Dorian Fleming against Towson. I'm going to guess it's a situation where they just didn't need him, so he ended up with 0. And I don't think he was hurt. I've got him on a few teams. Didn't seem to be injured, just didn't, get many targets. And then Brandon Norfleet, just kind of out of the blue, gets 1.2 points against Louisiana. But I guess it's because Hardy was doing all the work on the ground. They didn't need to press him and force it. So and then not far behind was the guy you picked to have one of the better weeks, which made sense going against Arkansas State, which was Brahmer from
Right.
Iowa State, but he only managed 1.3. So
That's
yeah, pretty unpredictable group here.
right. And like I said, it usually is. I mean, it's just kind of sad to be honest, but it is what it is.
The state of the college tight end is what you're saying.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then
Cozy.
so and with that, where's the Iowa tight end? I mean,
Yeah,
you should be a mainstay. I'm sorry, but
right. Whoever you are,
yeah,
I don't even
whoever
know
you
who it
are.
is. All right. Well, two names that did good enough that I'm sure will still be on the list. One is your number one tight end, Dorian Thomas. Managed 7.1 against UCLA in that surprise blowout that got a head coach fired this week. And then Koziol, 7.3 against Arizona State. Not the best, but as you see, certainly far from the worst among this tight end group.
Mm-hmm.
As mentioned, that was enough to keep them on the list, but not too many of the others maintain their status. Thomas moves to number 2. Hanukkah by default, because I think if we look at the sheet, Hanukkah had a bye, so
Right.
your new number 1 tight end is by default because he had a bye week, which is Deshaun Hanukkah at Kansas. Thomas isn't far behind; he's only a tenth of a point behind from holding that spot. And then Jeremiah Franklin moves up from 6 to 4. You had Eli Raridan move from 11 to 5. Tanner Koziol goes from 9 to 7. But Norfleet falls to 8. Several guys, aren't in the top 12 anymore. Brahmer goes all the way from 3 to 11. Fun name, though, that moved way up is Terrence Carter, Texas Tech. People, including me, I was part of people in this one, weren't sure how he'd be used at Texas Tech, if he was going to be as useful as he was last year when he was a group of 5 stud at Bowling Green. Wait, not the right guy, right? Let me see. I'm thinking of Fannin from Bowling Green.
Right.
Carter came from, let me see.
Lafayette.
Louisiana. Okay. So yeah, weren't sure if he was going to be able to kind of maintain that status as one of the top tight ends in the league. Only not because of the skill level, but because of that offense and Texas Tech spreading it out to the wide receivers. Was he going to be impactful enough to have a presence as the tight end? Well, he certainly is so far. He's proving. I heard Dwight Peoples took him in the Kings Classic draft. When I went back and watched that replay, he said that even though people were doubting like his usefulness in that system, certain players are just good enough that they force you to change the system a little bit, and that's what Terrence Carter seems to be doing. They're certainly making him part of the game script. This week he had 7 targets against Oregon State. Week 1 in a blowout, he got his 2 touchdowns early, even before they pulled him. So 2 touchdowns on only 3 targets in week 1. Kent State was just another blowout where it looks like he didn't have to, even do much. But yeah, he's going to be around just like he was last year. Oklahoma's quarterback, Jaron Kanak, makes his way from 14 to 6.
Tight end.
We had mentioned a tight end,
Yeah.
former linebacker. What did I say he was?
Quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
The
We
way
pointed him out.
the way he runs routes and things like that, I wouldn't surprise me if he wasn't a quarterback at some point in high school. But
No, one of those guys.
right,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think they have to go back and check that. But yeah, he's a guy that if you've been listening to our waiver drafts for the last 2 weeks, shouldn't be a surprise. We saw him coming, and he's definitely going to be here, throughout, I think. And then, fun name that popped up was we got old Mason Minnie come from number 20 to number 10 from Cal. They've actually got some guys that are making a little bit of noise at Cal now that their offense is better.
love the
Minnie and then
name.
DeHace, wide receiver.
Love that name.
What were you saying?
I love that
Yeah,
name.
Mason.
Yeah.
Another pickup from this week's waiver draft that could be available and is worth grabbing.
Now, one that we haven't touched on yet. What's your thoughts on Brett Norfleet? What went wrong, and will he stay here?
Yeah, let's see. Gonna look at something on him real quick. He's
I mean,
I don't
so against Kansas 2 weeks ago, he had 7 for 76 and the 2 touchdowns. I get it. You're not going to score 2 touchdowns every week,
yeah.
but then
You
why do
looking at
you only
this,
get 3 targets? I mean, and it
I
could
think
be a blowout, but like I
I
said,
think it's yeah. They didn't have to throw the ball. It's they won 52-10. We saw Hardy had the 200-yard game with all the TDs. I would think that he's a guy that could finish here. He'll definitely be in the top 20. But I would expect him to bounce back. It looks like when they have closer games, he's going to be an asset that they lean on, and they will have to spread it out, more, when they're playing more, other,
stiffer competition.
especially in the SEC. Yeah, in the
Yeah.
SEC, they're going to be able to shut down Hardy a little bit more than other teams have been able to, and they're going to have to start looking at other options.
Yeah, I just found it interesting. So Valari against Colgate, he has 66 snaps, and
Mm-hmm.
then Norfleet has 46 against Louisiana.
Oh, right.
It's just really strange. Like I said, I had to look and make sure he's not injured.
Yeah.
I just he just wasn't looking his way. He wasn't in. It was just really strange.
Yeah.
But
I think that's some blowouts. That's why it's been so frustrating. Like,
yeah,
you see coaches just take the opposite approach to how long they're going to keep guys in. Are they trying to prove a point? Are they trying to get some guy and get some more experience? And they just really didn't need him based on Hardy's production. There it is. Now, am I kicking us off on picks here?
yes.
Okay. So
But
let's
then,
see.
then to go
Go
back to
ahead.
what's even more frustrating. Sorry,
Yep.
and then I'll end it. This is in the late in the third quarter. Don't give the kid any stats. Don't give him any stats at that point. Why are you going to
What
give
do
him
you mean?
Why are you going to give him 3 targets in the third quarter?
Oh, you're looking at when he accumulated his
Yeah.
stats. You're right. Like, yeah, if the game's in that much control, why are you even bothering at
Yes.
that
Why are
point?
you even bothering? So he gets the 3 targets. He ends up with one reception for 2 yards. Why?
Now, you didn't have him in the league. You sound like an owner who's frustrated because you wanted to get the auto sub.
Oh, well, no, I have him in the league,
Yep.
but I'm
But
just
yeah. No, I've had a
just
couple guys this year where I've thought, like, into the third quarter they weren't even playing, and I was going to get an auto sub, only to end up with those same kind of garbage 2 or 3 targets at the end of the game. That
right.
I get stuck with a 0 or a 1 point game from a guy who, if he didn't have any targets, would have been able to be auto subbed, and I get the best player from the bench.
Right. And I would much rather have that and then go ahead and lose to the auto sub who did the exact same thing.
Yep.
But
Right.
you know what I mean? So anyway, let's move
Yep.
on.
All right. Now, we should not have difficulty getting points in this category this week because I'm looking. We have 5 tight ends on a bye, so
Yeah.
this kind of isn't even fair. So among 7 guys, we have to pick, 2 that will be the best, 2 that will be the worst. This is interesting, though. So
You're going first.
I'm going to go. I'm going to go Kanak as the best. We talked about his consistency. He's playing against Auburn, who does give up yardage in the air, and they're first against tight ends specifically. That's where it does help maybe to go to Fantrack, is try to differentiate like where they're giving up those yards. And it looks like tight ends have had a field day against Auburn. so far. So I think he continues that trend for Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, it seems
but we
that
got
I should. It
six
seems
up.
that I should go with my worst then.
Yeah, yeah. If we're kind of applying that
Uh-huh.
newly discovered
Yes.
strategy here
Yep.
that we thought of.
Supplying that strategy,
Hmm.
and then I guess it would be. You gave us all the stats on Carter.
Hmm. Yeah, but he is playing Utah, who's pretty good against the pass.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go Carter. As much as I probably want to go Norfleet at this point, and that's just out of spite. I can't.
Yep.
Valari, I still have faith in this kid for whatever reason,
Hmm.
and like I said, I picked up Mini, so yeah, it's gonna have to be Carter.
Okay. Yeah. So here's an interesting discrepancy. We were just talking about kind of how Fantrax provides their ratings as far as how many points a team has given up versus a certain position. Mason Minnie is an interesting case study there because he's going against San Diego State, who is 25th against the pass. So you would think that's not a good matchup, but then
Hmm.
when you look at the Fantrax number, it looks like they're showing Cal as being 111th against tight ends specifically.
Oh, San Diego State.
So yeah, San Diego. Who did I say?
You said Cal.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant
Okay.
they're
Okay.
playing Cal's playing San Diego State,
Right.
and
Right.
San Diego State is 25th against the pass, but 111th
111th. Yeah. So
in points allowed by tight ends.
so do we think that all three of these passing touchdowns they've given up have been wide receiver and running back?
Well, this is a good case study to check
Yeah.
Fantrax's work.
Okay.
I don't know that we want to do it now,
Well, that
but
not right here, but maybe in our wrap, maybe in
let's do it.
our wrap up,
Post,
we'll add
yeah,
it to for you guys and go a little dig a
yep,
little deeper. It's just three scores should find them fairly easy.
yep. Now, as far as the worst, though, aside from that, I think Raritan's going to have a big game against Purdue. Norfleet, is the interesting one. Valari's playing Clemson. This I'm not a big believer in Hanukkah though. I don't know that Hanukkah is going to maintain his status at number one. He's only there because of a bye. His one big game, he had 3.7 in week 0. So to be honest, he's only up there at number one because we don't count week 0. So he really shouldn't even be here. If you take his 3 game average, he's close to 10 or 11 points a game. So I'll put the worst mark on Hanukkah, and I think we see him fall to the bottom of this top 12, if not out of the top 12 after this week.
That's very interesting, and it just might decide our battle this week. But looking at, we were
Yep.
talking about San Diego State. Two of those three receiving touchdowns, actually, no, all three came from when they played Washington State. So
Okay.
we had all of them are receivers. Also, yeah, that number from Fantrax is very interesting on how they pull
Makes
it.
it more. Yeah, that'll be fun to get into that and just see
Yeah,
if
because Trey
we've always
Trey
suspected
Lechner
that
had
there's
two.
something weird about that.
So you said it's always been kind of weird. Repeat that.
Yeah, we've always wondered how accurate it is.
Yeah, so Trey Lechner had 6 for 17 and two touchdowns, and then Leon Neal Jr. 2 for 19 and a score. So they're your three receiving touchdowns that they've given up in that one game.
So yeah, we'll dig into that and see what
Yeah,
if we can figure
but
out the fan track formula
yeah,
ranking.
so interesting that you were saying. So technically, we're not picking the same guy. We said we weren't going to do that this year. I'm going with
Hmm.
Deshaun Hanukkah to be the best
Okay, yeah,
of the
that is
week.
a lot. Now you don't, yeah, you couldn't pick him as the worst since I
Right.
already did, but this could be the first time this has ever happened. We've never had a circle and an X on
I
a
want to say
player that I.
I want to say it's happened before. It's probably hadn't happened in a while, probably when we first started. But
I don't know. I don't know.
okay,
I don't think
I'll
so.
go back and look. But yeah, I mean, hey,
Like that, what I'm
first.
seeing there on the graphic, I don't recall ever seeing in my life.
Okay, well,
The circle with
hey,
the
there's a
square.
first time for everything, and you never say never, all that stuff. But
Well, now,
we talked about this in the waiver watch. I'm a big proponent, and hey,
mhm,
and I keep knocking. Jared and I, we actually do get along. We just we just have that opposite side of thinking sometimes, and it comes off a little cross. But
mhm,
guys coming off the bye, those are the ones that you wanna look at and target.
mhm.
And Hanukkah just coming off a great game, and I just think that it's he's gonna duplicate it. I mean,
Okay.
he had 6 for 74, caught all of his targets, two scores against Missouri, We were going to throw that Wagner game out. They didn't need him. They blew the doors off of
Same
Fresno.
thing.
Didn't need him.
Right.
So now they
Right.
see where the offense can go and give your quarterback, some help, some easy throws.
Mm-hmm.
This is the guy.
All right. Well, that'll be
Especially
a
in the
fun one
especially in
then.
the
Keep
red
an eye
zone.
on.
We're talking 6'6", 245. Who else are you throwing to?
Well, we'll find out.
Right. So Deshaun Hanukkah.
All right. I still say he's lucky to be at the number 1 spot because we don't count week 0, which rightfully
Oh
so. We
God.
shouldn't count.
What,
We
what,
shouldn't count week 0 because it doesn't count as a fantasy week, so those fantasy points should not count in our averages, just like we don't count postseason games. So I
well,
don't argue our logic.
he did not count week 0.
No, we don't. But that's what I'm saying. If
Okay.
you counted week 0 in terms of his true season average
Well,
for fantasy
okay.
points,
Well, ifs and buts, and we don't have to do that. That's why we have our date chart. So technically,
no, exactly. But
he's where he's at.
he's where he's at because the last 2 weeks he's done better than he did week 0. That's fine.
Right.
We'll see what
Yeah.
happens. But I've talked enough. I'm not even going to do any formal signing off. I'm just going to pass it over to you, Willie, to wrap this thing up.
All right. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and good luck this week.